Got it working. Okay. It wasn't working for a minute. I guess I forgot how to use Bandicam. Um, so, hi. It's been a little bit. I, got a haircut. Um, I kept forgetting to make videos because I would get off of work quite late and want to go to bed. And then I figured I would just record a whole bunch on one of my off days, so everything you're about to see is probably going to be filmed in the next 3 or 4 hours. Um, but anyway, so, um, where I left off was essentially with a reminder to myself about the orchestra, which now I'm not sure if I want to tell you, but it's honestly kind of funny, so I might. Um, but essentially where I left off was I got very, very sick. I was pretty much okay by lunch. Still did not feel 100%. Um, so that was not fun. So I didn't really pay all that much attention to what exactly was going on with the group for a little bit that day. Like, honestly, I don't really remember setting up that campsite in the first place or where exactly that campsite was. I think we might have taken another hike in between, but from what I'm remembering, we stayed at that campsite basically until the next time the therapist came out, which I hope she fell in the river. Um, anyway, so, uh, really, Norton? Please stop. So, sorry, I've been really dissociated the last couple of days and having random panic attacks and flashbacks, and it's been interesting. Um, so I think I'll be fine still doing videos though, and either way I want to share this story. So, here we go. So, I'm pretty sure we stayed in that campsite pretty much until the next time that a therapist came. So, unless we moved sites in between, because some of the campsite that I remember doesn't match up with where I talked with the therapist, but that week I did indeed get to speak with Ashley herself, which at this point I was already sort of accustomed to the it's not going to be fun if you don't just do what they say. So at this point I rolled into that therapy session and my goal was to convince her that I was perfectly fine and did not need to be on safety because I really, really, really didn't want to be on safety anymore. So, I got into the therapy session and I don't really remember a lot, honestly, besides just sort of talking. Like, not really about anything specific or about anything even remotely therapy related. It wasn't even really get to know you, it was just sort of talking about, like, whatever the topic went to. Which, averagely with a therapist, I would say that's not a bad thing to start with, considering you do have to get to know the person that you're treating. But it was interesting in this scenario, considering I'm only going to be here a little bit. I figured it would be a lot more intensive therapy than that, but I guess it was mostly just, let's have a conversation, at least at this stage. And so we just talked for a bit. I didn't bring up Libby, because I didn't want to start that whole thing again. And so, I got off safety, and I'm pretty sure I had therapy the second day again. Which I do, one of the things that I remember is the new girl Tori did go way before I did, and I was like, ya bitch. I had to wait. But I did get seen, and we talked, and I got off safety, which was nice, because then I could move around a little bit more. All I could really do was move within eyesight and earshot, so still not very far, but at least it was something. So, after that, we went on the hike, which we still permanently refer to as 4 hours of Pax on Hell. Oh boy, this hike. So at this point, my pack is still not very heavy. The only things I'm carrying are the stuff that I brought with me, my bear bag, which had my food in it, and, well, at least my portion of the food. The food got distributed between everybody. But, so I got my portion of the food, and, like, this little grate that we brought that we would set over the fire to cook the tortillas when we were on Expo, because they were just better cooked. Same with, honestly, now's a good time to explain the food. So the food could have been worse, but it also could have been so much better. So it was breakfast on Expo, has one addition that the rest of the breakfasts don't. So on Expo, you have the options well, we don't get to pick, but whatever breakfast is going to be, it's not really on a schedule. We would have, like, if we needed to move faster, we would have granola. So if we didn't think that we were going to be out of the campsite in time to make it to the next one before dark, we would eat granola, which was faster, and I never again had the milk because that made me so sick. Powdered milk is bad. And then we had the oats and brown sugar, which is oats and bee sugar. And then we had on Expo we could have eggs, bacon, and naan, which sounds fantastic. Until you realize that the eggs are powdered eggs, which I found good mostly because they were really salty if you made them really salty, and after a while you start really craving salt. So the salt was nice. The bacon was, I don't know what was up with the bacon, but it tasted fine to me. And then the naan is like, if you don't know what naan is, it's a type of flatbread, and it's relatively dull and flavorless, but at that point I'd not really been introduced to a lot of different new foods growing up, so I was used to food that was sort of bland, so it was nice to me to have something that was just bread. Especially considering that was the only meal that we ever got any sort of bread, and it still wasn't bread, it was just sort of bread. And so, then for lunch, it would be, starting on Sunday for the sake of ease, it would be, Sunday was the tuna tort thing, Monday was PB torts, Tuesday was the horrifying tuna thing again, then PB torts on Wednesday, Thursday was hummus day, which that's the powdered hummus that I was talking about, and it's not good. And then Friday PB torts, Saturday PB torts. My favorite days were the PB tort days because I just like peanut butter. Which I'm surprised I still like peanut butter considering how much goddamn peanut butter we ate there sometimes, but which none of that is very filling considering PB torts is literally just you get a spoonful of peanut butter on a tortilla. One on each tortilla. And the tortillas are like this big. So, basically nothing for lunch. And then dinner was, if I could find my cups, I'd show you. I'm seeing if I have anything that's about the same size as they were. I don't really. So they were like, probably this big around, and right around this tall. Which, based for comparison. So small cups, and the most that you could have was 2 cups of that. Sometimes we got away with making a lot more, and being able to give everybody else another little bit extra because the staff didn't want the food to go to waste. But once they caught on what we were doing, it was back to only 2 cups no matter how much you cooked. So, basically nothing for dinner as well, and the 2-cup rule applies to all of it. So, dinner was... So, Sunday was rice and lentils. Monday was Wilder mac, which is mac and cheese, but flavorless. Tuesday is rice and lentils. Wednesday is chili, which I got sick from every single time I ate. Which I love chili. I don't get sick from eating chili. It was not kept well, I imagine. Thursday was rice and beans, which was the best day because you got a tortilla. and if they pass the tortilla bag around in the dark, sometimes you could yoink a third tortilla without them noticing. Which they're still the tiny tortillas. And then Friday was rice and lentils, Saturday was rice and beans again. The best days were the rice and beans days. We called them, so rice and lentils is R&L, rice and beans is R&B, chili is just chili, and then Wildermac, obviously. So we kind of had nicknames for all of it, so we had PB Torts, we had Tuna Torts, pretty sure hummus was just hummus. I also might mention that the pita bread that they gave us was not nice pita bread, it was that, again, probably about this big, and dry, and it, like, you could have probably hit these things against a rock and they wouldn't have broke. So, yay. But from there, so we went on the hike that we call 4 hours of Packs on Hell, which now I do not need to be in the back of the line anymore, so I was just walking with the rest of everybody. We did the hike in the afternoon, I believe, because we were, let me think. Yeah, no, on Expo, when you have to be in a line for any reason, in the mornings you cannot talk, but in the evenings and afternoons you can. So, we were talking, I remember, so it would have been after lunch when we left. And this was a horrifying hike. Like, it was a 4-hour-long hike, and it was like this the entire way. Which, if you've never tried to do that with a really big backpack on, that's awful. That's awful without a backpack, especially for 4 hours of it. But it was so much like we had to sit down and rest constantly because there was always somebody who couldn't make it another step, and it was just, God, it was awful. And that was also the first time in my life that I've ever had breathing problems, which proceeded to last the rest of forever. And I don't know what happened, but during that point at Wilderness, I was wheezing regularly on hikes, and it's not asthma. I don't know what it is, but I was wheezing regularly on hikes. And, I was trying to get the staff, or my parents, or anybody to let me go see a doctor for it, and they refused to, so for the rest of the Wilderness experience, which at this point is probably like 80-something days left, I was permanently doing that. Every single hike wheezing, which was awful. So we struggle our way to the top of this hill, and by the time I'm up at the top, I feel like I'm going to die. And we had an extra staff with us whose name was Clay, and he actually complimented me, saying that I was doing something, probably unintentionally, that only very experienced hikers usually do, and that was keeping my pace very steady. Even if I was going slower than the rest of everybody, I was staying exactly in beat with, like, how long my steps were and everything, so that way it wouldn't, like, I was less winded overall, because at least I'm going at a steady pace instead of, like, forcing myself to go very fast and then slowing down, and then forcing myself to go fast and then slowing down. Which I didn't even realize I was doing at that point, I was just trying to not die. And so was everybody else. So finally we get to the top of the hill, and we're all like, yes! Finally! And so we all throw our packs down. It became a thing to sit on our packs during hikes, so we all throw our packs down, and we're sitting there having fun, and catching our breath, and mostly just kind of wishing we were done with the hike so that we could fucking sleep. Which we were not done with the hike, but we sat there and we drank water for a while, and during this hike we'd been told to pick up a stick at some point. And so Becca, which is one of my favorite staff, and I don't know. It's weird to me to talk about Becca, because I adored Becca, and I felt like she was genuinely trying to help at the time, but now I wonder, because she saw what we went through there, and I don't know that anybody who's genuinely trying to help could watch that and think that that's okay. But, so, we get to the top of the hike, and Becca gathers us all up, so we come sit in a circle. And Becca goes, okay, so I asked you to grab a stick during that hike, right? I need you all to hand me your sticks. So we all hand her our sticks, and they're all, like, about this long and not very thick. And so she goes, alright, so this was an exercise in learning how, like, the benefits of working together. If you take this one stick on its own, you can break it easily. But if you take all of these sticks put together and you try to break them, they just don't break. And then somehow she managed to tie that into me getting my Phase 2 book, which I didn't realize was a possibility at that point because I still hadn't found Poison Ivy. But, Becca explained to me, like, you're good, the Poison Ivy, you still have to find Poison Ivy and point it out to us, but you can have your next level book because it's not your fault that we couldn't find Poison Ivy, it just isn't anywhere. And I was like, great, I've completed Phase 1. Okay, great. So I stuffed my Phase 1 book down deep in my backpack like die, and I put my second one in, we called it the brain of the pack, it was just the very top of the pack, and it covers the opening where you would pull stuff out, so you flip it back up and clip it on to keep it in place. So flip that back on, clipped it on, and I put my journal right in there. And I was my Phase book right in there, and I was very pleased with myself. So we sit around for another minute or two, and we eventually start the hike back down, which was an interesting hike to say the least. It was significantly steeper than the way up, and rockier, which means you're more likely to slip. So we were entirely unsure how we were supposed to actually get down this without dying. Or, like, seriously, if you'd fallen, I remember points of it just looked like a cliff. Like, walking up to it, it just looked like a cliff. If we'd fallen, it would have been very dangerous, and most of us were inexperienced hikers, especially me at this point, because while I had gone into the woods before and had enjoyed myself in the woods before, I'd never been on a serious hike. So, I basically tried to not slip the entire way down, and I'm not entirely sure how I managed it. And finally, we get into another campsite, and we all split off to do our stuff. I don't really remember what I did other than try to help set up the tents. And then a little ways outside of camp, it starts raining. And it's not just a little bit of rain, it's like a downpour. So we're all drenched within minutes. We don't have time to get our rain gear out of our backpacks because we didn't know it was gonna fucking rain. And we didn't think it was gonna roll in that fast. It had been cloudless like 5 minutes ago. And so we all run, like, we're moving a lot faster now, and we get to where we're supposed to set up where we're supposed to set up camp. And we get everything going and put in place. Starting to dissociate. So we get everything sort of set up, and I'm just kind of standing there in the rain, very wet, and my red is wet because I was wearing it as it was cold that day, and so is my shirt and my pants, and I'm just kind of freaking out, because I don't do well being wet. I'm good with it if I'm going to be able to change into dry clothes soon, and I know I'll be able to change into dry clothes soon and go sit in a dry house somewhere and be dry, but I was freaking out, and finally one of the others noticed, and her name was Leah, and she did not start out one of my good friends, but over time became so, and we still talk every once in a blue moon, but we still talk, and I miss her. But she noticed, and she offered to trade my red for her red, because she didn't mind it being a little bit damp, and I did, so, which we were not supposed to do at all whatsoever, but, she said that she didn't mind, and if we just did it real fast behind the packs and I grabbed hers instead of grabbing mine, nobody would notice. So, we swapped reds, and I got to go change into slightly drier clothes, and felt a little bit better from there. And we spent most of the rest of the night sitting under a tarp around the fire, trying to get an actual fire started rather than just a couple of sticks that liked to burn. Which, one of the things that we used a lot was hemlock, which, I believe it's hemlock. Yeah, hemlock. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but, hemlock, I believe, is, this type of tree. It looks kind of like an evergreen tree, like a pine tree, and its branches, because of the sap, will burn whether or not they're wet. Which became our best friend over time once we that was one of the things that we were taught. And once we got used to doing that, we did that. That was like all that we ever burned if we could find it, because it was just everything was wet constantly. I didn't realize it, but it was going to be like there were going to be 2 days a week in which it did not rain, which was awful. And so anyway, we could basically only get our bags of hemlock to burn, which we were only ever taking hemlock off of downed trees or just what we could find around the base of one of the trees, because it's an endangered species in North Carolina. So I don't know why they were teaching us to use that wood specifically, considering it's an endangered species, and a whole bunch of desperate teenagers are more likely to pull down trees than anybody else trying to stay warm. But, so, we were able to get the bags of hemlock burning, and eventually we were able to, through making that fire hot enough, get some other sticks to burn. And it was a very small fire and not very warm or helpful, but it was enough to cook dinner on, at least. And so, we stayed there for the night. And then the next day, I got sent on the water run, which I did not end up doing much on this water run, because when we went to go get the water, the river from the rain had become, rather than a calm river, a gigantic roaring mess of a river. Like rapids 3 feet away from us kind of mess, and it didn't look like the water should have physically been staying in the lines of the river because of how wildly it was twisting and boiling and everything that water does when it moves too fast. And so they wound up only allowing the staff to actually go and gather the water, but we could carry it back because they didn't want one of us to fall in and get swept away. Which, finally, something logical. So, we carried the water back after witnessing that whole mess, and we filtered the water, did our whole breakfast thing. I don't honestly remember what we had for breakfast. Retrieved our bear hang, which the previous night we'd only been able to get the bear hang like 3 feet off the ground, because it was very late, and we were all very tired, and we were letting it slip, and it just wasn't going well. So finally the staff did the rest of the bear hang basically for us, because there were actually enough staff with us at that point. Which there were 2 extra staff that just sort of joined us, and I don't know why they were there. But anyway, so I felt it coming. But anyway, so we finally packed everything up, and we moved on along, and we wound up in a couple more different campsites. We mostly just kind of bounced back and forth. Phase 2 is where you start to be allowed to sort of at least observe the fire. Like, you're not allowed to have, eventually you get an FDFK, which is a full dry fire kit, or a FDFK, and, that is where you keep a bag of hemlocks, a bag of small dried sticks. You need 2 tinder bundles, which are at least the size of your fist, which I lucked out, I have very small hands, and you need, char cloth, which is the charred cloth that I talked about, a quartz rock, and a steel striker, which, actually, I'd forgotten I'd bought this until I mentioned it. But, this, you can't really see, but this is grooved, is a steel file. And what they would do to make the steel strikers is they would cut them about here and here, and you would use this, and you would hold your rock, and you'd hit it. And if you hit it the right way, it makes sparks, and that's how you ignite the char cloth. This is now my fidget. Anyway, I'm hoping to rebuild another FDFK, because honestly, it's not a bad skill to have. Especially if I'm going to go hiking at some point, it would be better to not use 1,500 matches and instead just be very careful with one piece of char cloth, a steel striker, and a quartz rock. But anyway, so it has that stuff. Then it has there's bow drilling, which honestly, that's harder to explain than it's worth without the actual materials, so I would just look up some videos on bow drilling, which is bow, B-O-W, and then drilling, like drilling a hole in a wall or something. So look that up. It's interesting. It's another method to start a fire. So we had all of the materials that were necessary for that. Although bow drilling only starts once you hit phase 4. And then so I was allowed to start sort of observing the fire stuff happen. And one of the staff taught me a little bit about how to properly build a fire and stuff anyway, even though I wasn't technically supposed to know yet because it was just going to be helpful in the long run to know anyway. So I learned all of that stuff and had another therapy session and wrote a couple more letters, which I'm going to do a video where I read all of my letters, and hopefully I'm going to get my stuff from Jay's house and be able to show you guys that stuff. But anyway, so the rest of Expo is basically either we're wet and crying, we are hiking and somebody really has to pee, and is not being allowed to because the staff don't want to stop yet. We are attempting to build a fire in the vain hope that we will be able to actually build one and be able to have a warm dinner. Or we're just kind of flopped on the ground somewhere working on level stuff. Which I spent a lot of time working on level stuff, and we got to, so we got to the end of Expo, and I was nearly done with my Phase 2 stuff. I forget what exactly I had, but I had a couple more things to do, and then I was good. Which I will add, one of the things that starts happening once you hit Phase 3 is you start needing to have a full FDFK in order to level up, which is horrible, because a full FDFK includes a whole gallon bag of both types of sticks. So in essence, you either don't level up for a long time because you can't find enough hemlock or have enough tinder bundles, which are always the problem. The small dry sticks are never the problem. You could usually just pick them up from a campsite somewhere. But anyway, so either that, or you just never use your FDFK, which was what I started doing after a while. Was I got smart enough to recognize that on hikes I should probably be grabbing stuff that could be used as a tinder bundle. And so I started grabbing stuff on hikes, and that way I never had to use my FDFK, but that was only because I was so good at building a fire by that point. Most people were not that good at building a fire by that point, so they had to use their FDFKs, and we were never given enough time to find hemlock. Or at least we very, very rarely were. So by the time you needed to level up, you had to spend at least 3 or 4 days just trying to find the materials, let alone get enough of them, which was awful, and a really good way of holding us back. So anyway, I finished level 2 very quickly, and right at the end of Expo, we went to a place called Sky Valley. Which Sky Valley is the place where you stay in yurts, which I describe as a tent with a floor. And, basically you do nothing, or we go to see Science Steve, whom I particularly like, although Science Steve almost made me cry a couple of times. Not really for stuff that he realized he was doing, but a lot of the stuff that he said would remind me of people from home, or at least the outside world. And that would make me really sad when I realized what was going on. And that was horrible. And, one of the things that happened at Science Steve's was the hand sanitizer smelled the same as the type that Rose, my ex-mother, had used when I was a kid. So and at this point I'm more vulnerable to emotion and memories than ever before, so it would almost send me into a crying fit, wishing that I was back there, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, than I was here. And it was just hard to accept that reality. Especially when somebody's giving you, clear reasoning to not be in that reality. So, sorry, the cat came in. We get to Sky Valley. Science Steve is pretty cool. He does like a 4-week program, I think, so because most of us won't be there for all 4 weeks. So you go. This one was, I think, about power and stuff, so it wasn't particularly interesting. It was just a whole lot of information on like solar power versus fossil fuels versus nuclear stuff, and you get like a science credit for it or something. And so we spent some time at Science Steve's. He let us hold. He had a whole bunch of reptiles and snakes and stuff, and he let us hold some of them sometimes, which was fun. One thing I forgot. Before we left Expo, which this is going to be important later. Before we left Expo, another new person showed up. So 3 weeks in a row, it was I showed up, Tori showed up, and then a girl called. Sorry, I have to come up with a fake name for her. A girl called Shelby showed up. And she. I don't want to describe her too much either, but she was fairly pretty. And she was prettier than the others that were there. And so I thought she was interesting, but I didn't want to do much regarding her. Like, I didn't really think too much about her. I just, oh, she's pretty, and that was pretty much the end of my thought process. And so we go to Sky Valley, we do a whole bunch of stuff at Sky Valley, which is to say nothing. There's a lot of hiking in Sky Valley because Science Steve's place is what feels like at least a mile away from where you actually sleep. And that is with shortcuts. We also took some stupid shortcuts, which got us lost or like dragged us through swamps and stuff, and generally just the staff had no idea what was going on. Another thing that happens when you get to Sky Valley is the staff switch. So the staff are either on a 1-week or a 2-week rotation. Some staff are on 1 week, some staff are on 2 week. So they either stay with you for 1 or 2 weeks. So if it's a 2-week staff, they're going to stay with you either the entirety of Expo or they're going to stay with you the entirety of Sky Valley and Base, because each of those are only a week long. So the staff switched out, which I wasn't expecting. And then also we get the food redistributed because by the time you're done with Expo, you've either eaten most of it or you don't want to eat any of it anymore. So they give you new food, which the same food schedule stays. You don't get anything different, you just get more. Also during this time, let me think. No, that was next time I was on Sky. So, and that took me a while. So Sky Valley doesn't have a lot to talk about. It's mostly just, we're still in the woods, but we get to sleep indoors. One of the things that sucked was they would have us sleep in one big line on one side of the yurt, which there were also rats and mice in the yurt. Like a lot of them that would come up and like chew on your hair or sometimes bite students, and it was just not fun. And this was also the first time we'd gotten a shower since I was there, which you get 10 minutes in the shower, and that is 10 minutes to change, 10 minutes to shower, like 10 minutes for all of it. Which is not fun. And during the shower, you all have to talk to each other. So that the staff can tell that you're still there and you haven't ran or something. So I basically just never washed my hair in the shower. I would just, like, wash my body twice, because by the time you get off Expo, like, washing yourself once doesn't work. I would rather have washed myself 3 or 4 times. Because it's just, like, it would literally just be soap up everything, rinse off. Not good enough. More soap. And so that was gross. So other than that, you get the food, the staff change, you get a shower for the first time ever. We usually only took 1 shower while at Sky and 1 or maybe 2 showers while on base. So basically, at this point, we're at 2 or 3 showers in a whole month, which is fun. And not hygienic. What else? I mean, honestly, that's it for Sky. You mostly just read books, or gather around and talk, or write letters, or there's a lot of downtime at Sky. It's a good time to get level work done, and I did get a lot of the level work done, but there was also stuff starting in that chapter where I had to, like, send a letter to my parents to get some information about it before I could complete it, because it started to be more based off of me myself. And then on top of that, it took me a long time to get my FDFK together to the point that, by the time I finally did, one of the things, it was a whole month later, and the next time we were at Sky, which base stayed the same, Sky stayed the same, Expo stayed the same. There's a couple of more interesting stories about Expo, but honestly, at this point, the story mostly just turns into notable moments, which include... Honestly, I might make this video a little bit short so that I can start the next video with the specifically notable moments, if that's okay. So basically, it just goes like that. Expo is 2 weeks long of shitty hiking and really heavy packs and crying almost every day and wishing you were anywhere but there. Sky Valley feels like a relief by the time you get there. Everything is pretty much the same, you just have a roof to sleep under, sort of. And, they line y'all up, so hopefully nobody rolls in their sleep, because we had several people that rolled all the way down the line in their sleep. Basically, still no privacy. There were a lot of things that you do only in private that you learned how to do in the middle of the night when everyone else was asleep, which I will not go into detail on, but you can guess. And, then you get back to Sky, or base rather, and you just spend a lot of time, like, gathered around and doing level work, but you also have Horse Ann to go to, which is basically, let's go clean up Horse Ann's place and then pet horses for 10 minutes. And Teacher Dave, whom I eventually got along with and completed all of my work. Which I guess he just wanted to give me a hard time because it was my first week. This is all I got. So, I'm gonna cut off the video here. I'm about to go film more videos, which is fun because I'd rather be out skateboarding right now. I just got a new one. But yeah, so thank you for listening again if you have indeed listened this far, and see you in the next video.